I was having y'all. It's your boy Rico from RicoScores. And then, man, are the Washington Commanders winning free agency? Things have calmed down a little bit now, but things are definitely not over. There's still a lot of good players out there, but so far, are the Washington Commanders winning free agency? And I'm not even going to dive into that just yet from my point of view. We're here to discuss how national analysts feel about the Washington Commanders and how they're giving their opinions on whether or not we're winning free agency. I have a lot of praise from a lot of neutral media members that typically don't give us this type of praise. So they're clearly seeing the vision that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Josh Harris are trying to bring to Washington. Also, we got to talk about the Washington Commanders win the Sam Howell trade. We're going to talk about that. Of course, we have like some Walter football in there. We have Kay Adams. We have Chase Daniels, people from NFL Network, people all over the place talking about the Washington Commanders killing it in free agency. Also, Kevin Durant is excited. He was particularly excited about one specific signing. We're going to talk about that. And man, the Commanders are finally receiving praise from the national media members, like just in general. There was like a little bit of hype before the start of last season, but this is completely different. But like I always say, we're not here for validation. At least I'm not. But it is still fun to see everybody acknowledge and praise our potential greatness for a change. But again, I'm not here for validation. We don't need this, but it is fun to get it, and I do want it. But before we dive into everything, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Again, like I promised, I'm still working on the FA Obata, the Jamison Crowder signings. Any signings that I haven't talked about yet, I believe there's like 3 of them. I'm still working on those, but I've just ended up super busy with a whole bunch of other stuff. So like things outside of YouTube. So I really appreciate y'all staying patient with me. I know it's crazy that like we signed Jamison Crowder a couple of days ago and I still haven't talked about him. It's on the way, I promise you. So stay tuned for that and a whole lot more creative videos like this one where we're kind of going outside of me just reporting what's happening. I'm trying to take opinions. I'm working on a mock draft. After that Sam Howell trade, our picks are different. And with after free agency, all of the especially defensive guys we signed, now I think in my next mock draft, I'm definitely going to focus more offensively than anything else. So make sure you stay tuned for that. I'm really excited. And let's go ahead and get to this video, man. Let's get it. And y'all already know what time it is by now, man. Shouts out to my boy Twin T for the big donation to the Cash App, man. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that's been donating because, again, y'all aren't even waiting until I'm live streaming to donate to where I can thank you immediately for everybody else to see. Y'all are doing it just randomly. I'll release a video at like 3 p.m. and y'all will just randomly donate at like 9 or 10 p.m. So, again, I feel like the least I could do is thank you in my next upcoming video, man. I really appreciate it. My boy Twin T, I appreciate everybody that's been donating throughout this whole free agency period. Y'all been going crazy. I really appreciate it. Y'all are helping me build this thing up even better. Again, I'm about to go get that new stream deck because y'all been going crazy and all of that. But instead of wasting more of y'all time, let's go ahead and dive into this video. So first of all, after day 1 of free agency, well, technically day 1 of the legal tampering period because that was Monday. Free agency technically didn't start until Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But even like day 1, people were on us, and you had Cherie Burris talking about us. We had like a whole section in NFL Network, like where they literally just talked about Commanders after just the very few signings that we had that day to start it off, where we signed Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz, and a whole few other guys, and they were already hyping us up, and they were like, man, these guys are okay. Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, they're doing things differently for the Commanders. There seems to be like a great level of active and aggression, but also not overpaying. And they basically talked about that in this segment and basically like, okay, the Commanders look like they're cooking. And again, this was after like day 1 or day 2 when they did this. This is before we even got like Jeremy Chin or Bobby Wagner or traded away Sam Howell. We're going to get there. We're kind of going in somewhat chronological order right now, but then I also tweak some things around for it to make a little bit more sense because later on we're going to get to some grades. So I felt like I should save some of the overall grades for how like Pro Football Focus and then like draft analyst, neutral draft analyst, national draft analyst, not a Commanders fan at all, how he graded our overall free agency. Again, we'll get there soon. But sticking with NFL Network for a little while, Sean O'Hara loves what we did in free agency, and this came out March 13th. He said, quote, "My man is putting on a masterclass right now on how to rebuild a culture and how to rebuild a roster." And basically, he loves what Adam Peters has done so far for the Commanders in free agency. And that's like a whole nother segment in itself. That was like a 1 minute, 47-second video of him praising us and how excited he is because now it looks like things are finally different. That's really the main theme. Like, and, you know, maybe some people may look at it as like a backhanded compliment. I don't at all. I'm happy because it's the truth. The main theme that a lot of people are saying is, right, it seems like now they're doing things right. Like, finally, things are changing. It's not like where there's some teams out there having a good free agency and it's like, okay, they're having another one. This is what we expected them. It's still great, but this is what they do. This is their brand. This is already in their culture. This is what we know them for. Most people that compliment the Commanders, especially national media wise, are basically pointing out the fact that this is not typical for them. This is new. Like, they're shocked, they're surprised, they're like, oh man, look at the Commanders doing something. And again, I don't take it as a negative. I don't see it as a backhanded compliment because it's absolutely true. It's the complete 100% truth. This is not typical. That's why us fans are so excited, because this is new for us. At least it's been a really long time in my lifetime since I think we've ever like been this smart with the free agency period, I could argue. But also moving on, of course, Rosenberg, who's a big time burgundy and gold fan up there in New York with his radio show, when he talked about the Commanders and free agency, this was March 14th, so just a couple of days ago, so technically Thursday, he said, quote, "They're bringing in young talent. They're bringing in veterans. I'm not making Super Bowl plans, but if they can get the right quarterback, they can play competitive football this year," unquote. And that's coming directly from a Commanders fan that has his heart and soul in this team, but also trying to take like a step back real quick. Like, I'm not saying Super Bowl, but if they hit on quarterback, if they take the right guy second overall, we may be something scary to mess with this season. That's basically what he's saying. Shouts out to Rosenberg, man. Big time burgundy and gold fan over there, man. And then also Peter Schrags of NFL Network, he was talking about how well the Commanders were killing in the free agency. This was also March 14th from Good Morning Football. This was also Thursday as well. And he said, very solid. They got a lot better this week. And was basically talking about how the Commanders free agency, man, they're pulling in a lot of impact starters. They're not just, it's not like the Commanders have signed the most players in free agency so far, which we've done. We've signed the most players out of any NFL team so far. But it's not like we're just signing a bunch of guys to ridiculous money or a whole bunch of non-starters. We're like that perfect middle where we're signing guys to relatively cheap money, great value, but then they're also impactful players, starters, guys at the very least that are going to be a part of a heavy rotation. The only guy that we signed that I don't see really playing at all, or at the very least we hope we don't see him play at all, is quarterback Marcus Mariota. Everybody else is either a certified starter or going to be a part of a heavy rotation, or they're an important special teams player. We haven't just signed any just random Joe Schmo yet, and that's going to start happening eventually once we start to fill out this roster. We try to go from where we are right now, like in the 60s probably somewhere, to get us all the way up to the 90s. Some guys are just going to be camp bodies. Some guys are just going to be, you know, people just to practice against and practice with type of thing. But until then, so far, we've been doing a really good job of not only getting starters, but then also getting them at undervalued prices, man. Like, this is crazy what we're doing right now. Shouts out to the Commanders, man. I mean, it just feels so good. Then Chase Daniels, also of Good Morning Football, he tweeted out, the Commanders are running away with free agency, and it's not even close. So he feels like we're the number one team in free agency so far, and this is also from March 14th, as in Thursday. He's saying that not only are we winning free agency, but it's not even a close second right now. He said Dan Quinn is a difference maker. Getting the culture set with the right guy is his priority, and Adam Peters, doing his thing. I mean, yo, It's hard to argue against it, man. I feel like even if you're not a fan of the Commanders, you have to look at what we're doing and be like, hey, man, these guys are going a little stupid over there. I may be a little bit concerned, especially if I'm an NFC team or specifically an NFC East team. Or especially the Cowboys, who ain't been doing nothing. I mean, shouts out to them for getting that recruiting flip on Eric Kendricks. As a Georgia Bulldogs fan, I know how it feels. I know exactly how it feels. Where a guy looks like he's definitely coming to you, everything's agreed upon. Next thing you know, somebody comes in with a slightly bigger bag out of nowhere, and then suddenly they're not going to your school, your team, or whatever. And that's happened so many times, but most notably Caleb Downs. I mean, that I don't think I'll ever forget about the Caleb Downs situation, because he literally was looking at dorms where he was going to stay in. His whole family was on campus. They were getting ready to sign the paperwork, and I guess Ohio State swooped in. And basically, that's the only positive. My main point is that's the only thing the Cowboys have done. They had to slime ball somebody out there, free agency signing. That's all they've done. They re-signed a long snapper that was already a part of their team last year. And then I believe they may have made one other small move. And then they had to slime ball somebody out of Eric Kendricks real quick. I forgot the team that he announced that he was going to and was all hype about it and excited and everything. And then, boy, them Cowboys had to backdoor that one. That's all they've done. But even outside of the Cowboys, I know other teams are looking at the Commanders like, okay. I mean, honestly, that's a really good point that Rosenberg brought up, that like, man, if we hit on quarterback, that quarterback comes in and is ready to ball out immediately. It's spooky season for everybody. Next up, of course, Kay Adams on the Up and Adams show. Now, she's always extending love towards us and being like, hey, man, watch out. The Commanders may be doing something here. She was even doing that last season before we ended up going into a 4-win season, basically, ended up with the number 2 overall pick. But some of the things we were doing before that season started did show reasons for optimism. Most notably, Josh Harris and the whole energy that he had around there, improving the facilities and things like that, which is why Kay Adams even like went to one of our training camp practices, which if Dan Snyder was still our owner, that would have never happened. And like KD pulling up, all of those different celebrities pulling up and things like that, that wouldn't have happened if Dan Snyder was there. Definitely not like the government people trying to get us to move our stadium to Virginia, DC, Maryland, everybody fighting over us, those guys coming in and things like that. But back to my main point, she was there even trying to try to let the world know, hey, watch out, the Commanders may be working on something right here. Quiet as kept, there may be something brewing in the background, and that was last off season. Now imagine how people like her feel this season with what we're doing so far. And she was on her show, and her original tweet at the top said the Washington Commanders have low-key been the winners of NFL free agency so far. And that also came out March 14th, as in Thursday. And then like basically in her video, it's like a over 3-minute clip, and she talked about how smart the signings were, how we upgraded so many positions, how we're literally just a better team. Like if we had to play games right now, we would basically be able to win more games now than we did last year, just simply because we're literally just better right now. She didn't say that specifically, but she was saying they're literally already better right now than they were last year. Then she also said that it's very close to the offseason that the Texans had last year, before they went from the number 2 overall pick to the division winners and even winning a playoff game. And I've been bringing that up for the past few months now, after we secured that number 2 overall pick, even before we officially secured it. When we had it, then we lost it, then it came back and things like that. I was talking about, hey man, we end up with that number 2 overall pick, we get the right quarterback, then we can end up pulling the Texans. And now with the free agency moves that we're making, Kay Adams is bringing up the point that we're literally following the blueprint of what the Texans did. She didn't bring up these things specifically. I'm just adding this myself when I say that the Texans also did a great job of bringing in some really good coaches and a really good front office. Now, it wasn't just free agency, it was the coaching staff, it was the front office members. They had like a complete overhaul of everything that they were doing, and that's how you can go from 2 wins to winning a division and winning a playoff game, basically. And so far, you never know what can happen in the draft and things like that, but so far, we've literally been doing what the Texans did last offseason before they turned their whole organization around, and now people are looking at them completely different. Then you have Jamie Eisner of the NFL Draft Network, not a Commanders fan at all. I mean, he's just basically like a NFL betting, NFL draft, fantasy football guru type of guy, and he's based in Chicago, so maybe he's a Bears fan. I don't know, but he tweeted, Washington making smart, reasonable deals all day long is so weird, but good for them. again, it's kind of like, even as a non-Commanders fan, you just kind of get used to the Commanders kind of being like the butt of all of the jokes, the laughing stock of the NFL. And for us not to be that, for guys that, like, if you're of a certain age like me, this is all you know. You only know the sorry at best average Commanders. I wasn't alive to see any of our Super Bowls. So people like Jamie Eisner over there, NFL Draft Network, probably around my same age, is like, yeah, the Commanders looking good, being smart, making the right decisions is, I don't know, that's weird. And then the fact that he emphasized that we're making the right deals all day long, which means, like, not only did we like just get like a couple of good guys, maybe one here, one there, then maybe like a couple of bad ones sprinkled in. He basically said that like the whole day, March 11th, we were just killing it. And then we just continued to do it the day after that, and things like that. Then you have Ian Cummings, who is completely only NFL draft based. That's all he cares about. Not, again, let me emphasize, not a Commanders fan whatsoever. Not partial for us, not partial against us, biased towards us, any type of affiliation with, against us, nothing. Pure neutral analyst. The reason I'm giving you all of these adjectives is because what I'm about to read to you now, you would swear he was a bona fide Commanders fan, but he's just thinking that he feels like we're just killing it, like, I mean, that much, to that extent. He said Commanders offseason so far, A+. Signed Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz, Tyler Biadasz, Nick Allegretti on offense, signed Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Jeremy Chin, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler on defense, traded Sam Howell for capital. And then he said, draft like this and you're cooking. So if you look on the screen right now, he did a sample mock draft for us. He has us taking Drake May, then Jordan Morgan, and then a few other really notable players as well. And he's basically saying that, like, so far, they're having as great of an offseason as you can possibly have. Like, free agency wise, you literally can't do any better than how the Commanders are doing. And then basically, if they follow it up with a really good draft, and this is what he basically feels like is a good draft, then they killed the offseason. You could argue that they won the offseason. Again, from a non-Commanders fan, no bias at all here. And speaking of grades, Pro Football Focus put out some grades on Thursday, March 14th as well. Like most of these comments and people talking about the Commanders, they put out grades for teams that have dominated free agency. You have to have at minimum an A- grade to qualify for this graphic. And here's the graphic right here. So you have the Buccaneers, the Giants, the Vikings, and the Falcons with A-. Good for them. You know what I'm saying? That's cute. You know what I'm saying? That little A-, yeah, that's nice and all. But then you get to the Texans and the Commanders, and they feel like we have both had the best free agency so far out of any NFL teams. And the Texans, hey man, look at them. They're killing it. I mean, that they're who we hope to be in year 2 of this rebuild. We aspire to be them this year what they were last year in year 1. That's the goal. That's like the pinnacle of what you want to be. And then so far, year 2 up to this point, hey, Commanders, keep doing what they're doing. Keep following them right down that path. Not to be a copycat, but the Texans are killing it. The past year and a half has been absolutely ridiculous for these guys, and I'm expecting them to only get better. They won the division last year. I'm expecting them to win it again this year because of the moves they made, especially this free agency period. So shouts out to the Texans, and to be up there with them for Pro Football Focus, Brad Spielberger, another guy that has absolutely no bias for, towards, or against the Commanders, to feel like it's just the Commanders and the Texans in a league of their own so far in free agency is big time. And then let's also talk about another neutral analyst specifically, Walter Football, that, I mean, previously, even some of the moves that we made, even under Ron Rivera, Walter Football were graded so harshly. Like, this is stupid. This is a terrible signing. There's no value here. And there were even some of them where I was like, wait a minute, I actually kind of like that sign. I think that sign is actually pretty straight. And he was just like, no. Basically, everything y'all are doing is trash. Y'all may eventually get like an okay signing, but nothing was like ever great from Walter Football. I almost thought he hated us. But now this offseason, he's showing that he is neutral because he's officially given us all the props. And you can argue that he wasn't hating. It's just now is the first season that we've actually deserved real props and real accolades and things like that. So let's go ahead and get the bad one out the way. The lowest grade by far that he gave us so far in free agency was the signing of Marcus Mariota to a 1-year, $6 million base deal, which could end up reaching $10 million with incentives. Hope he never reaches those incentives. I don't want him ever even throwing a single pass in a regular season game, please. But he said it's interesting that the top 2 quarterback picks of the 2015 NFL draft signed with new teams in the same hour of free agency, and that's true too. Jameis Winston is heading to Cleveland. Marcus Mariota will be stationed in Washington next year. I don't like this signing nearly as much as the Winston deal. While Winston is a premium backup at this stage in his career, Mariota is more of a third stringer, and I kind of want to agree. I'm not gonna lie. I really almost 80-something, 90% agree with a lot of the things that Walter Football says throughout these reviews and grades that he's given all of our free agency signs. Well, not all of them, but most of the important ones, but we'll get there. But I definitely especially agree with this one. He was outperformed by Tanner McKee last preseason by a wide margin. He failed in Atlanta the year prior, and that was a weird situation where he just stopped playing for them. That was really weird. Mariota is a clear downgrade from Jacoby Brissett. I completely agree. And I'm not sure if he's better than Sam Howell. I think Sam Howell's better than Marcus Mariota in my opinion as well, but we can't trade Marcus Mariota for what ended up being the net value of a late 3rd, early 4th round pick. So I mean, you got to do what you got to do, I guess. The only reason we traded away Sam Howell rather than keeping Sam Howell over Marcus Mariota is because you literally can't get in return for trading away Marcus Mariota. Otherwise, somebody else would have just signed him. Now, the worst grade after the Marcus Mariota grade is still a good grade, a B grade, and it was for us signing tight end Zach Ertz to a 1-year, $5 million deal. He said tight end is a huge need for the Redskins, but then again, so is pretty much everything. Again, this is before we started making all those crazy signings. Logan Thomas was on the roster, but Washington released him, making the hole even larger. That was filled temporarily by the signing of Zach Ertz. Ertz will turn 34 during the 2024 season, so it's obvious to say that his best days are far behind him. However, he had some decent performances last year before getting hurt. He can still play somewhat decently, and he'll be a fine stopgap for the Redskins, who are still expected to find a younger tight end soon. Ertz makes for a nice insurance policy in case that doesn't happen, and it's nice that he has experience in Cliff Kingsbury's system. I completely agree. Moving on, the next lowest grade. Again, we're going in order of grade level. We're just only going to get better and better and better. The next lowest grade is a B+ that he gave us for us signing Dorrance Armstrong to a 3-year, $45 million deal. And the cap hits are way less than that. It's a phenomenal deal value-wise. The way they set it up, the people back there working the contracts are going crazy for the Commanders right now. If you look at Dorrance Armstrong's stats, they don't exactly pop off the page. He has recorded 8.5 and 7.5 sacks in the past 2 seasons, which is good, but not great. However, consider that Armstrong was just a part-time player. With a larger role, Armstrong's sacks totals should rise. Given the size of Armstrong's contract and all the recent pass rushing departures on the Redskins, there will be more snaps for the former Jayhawk in the future. In fact, this contract may look like a bargain down the road. Dorrance Armstrong, when we all look back maybe a year or 2 from now, he's probably going to end up looking like a steal. Then next up, the next lowest grade he gave us was an A- for linebacker Frankie Louvu, signed to a 3-year, $36 million deal, and I'm surprised this one isn't higher. I thought this was honestly an A+ in my opinion. I like this signing more than some of the signings that Walter Football felt like were A+, but we'll get there. Frankie Louvu was easily one of my top 3 signings. He said, I can't remember the last time the Redskins had great linebacker play. London Fletcher in 2012, in my opinion. Oh, matter of fact, that's literally what he says. Was it during the days of London Fletcher? I would agree. I would definitely agree. I would say yes. Honestly, don't know. The Redskins haven't been able to cover the middle of the field for quite some time, but that looks like it's going to finally change. Frankie Louvu is an excellent, well-rounded linebacker. He can do everything. And the Panthers knew how valuable he was when their defensive play declined as a result of him being out of the lineup last year. Louvu deserved this sort of deal, and Washington finally has his linebacker upgrade. Then he gave us an A+ for signing running back Austin Eckler to a 2-year, $11.4 million deal. A+, y'all. A+. And this is not the only A+. Now, this is a good running back contract. When I first saw the Redskins that signed Austin Eckler, I rolled my eyes and guessed that they gave him something north of $10 million per year. That is not the case, as Austin Eckler will be earning about half as much on a short-term contract. If you owed Eckler in fantasy and played him in DFS last year, you may remember him being terrible. Eckler had a great week 1 performance, but then suffered an injury. He was never the same after that for the entire season. I think it's very likely that he'll rebound, so he'll be a great receiving weapon for whichever quarterback the Redskins selected number 2 overall in the 2024 NFL draft. And he, so far, if you go click on his link to his mock draft, he has us picking Jayden Daniels, just to let you know. Then next up, he gave us an A+ grade as well for us signing guard Nick Allegretti, 3-year, $16 million deal. It's definitely a new day in Washington. It for sure is. The Redskins used to be, and again, I'm saying Redskins, that's literally what he's saying. He refuses to call us, when we were the Washington football team, he wouldn't call us that. He wouldn't call us the Commanders. He still calls us Redskins. But either way, used to be infamous for overspending on Asian veterans. This, like the Austin Eckler signing, is a very sharp move. Nick Allegretti didn't play very much last year, but he did a terrific job of filling in for an injured Joe Thuney during the Chiefs Super Bowl run. His high level of play indicated that he deserved a chance elsewhere. The Redskins recognized this, signing Allegretti to what could look like a ridiculous value deal in the future, all while filling a huge need. Again, A+. And then, even though Bobby Wagner's not an A+, I saved him for last out of the free agency signings just because, I mean, it was the most recent big one. It was so exciting. Felt like I should save, arguably, in my opinion, one of the best for last. Redskins signed linebacker Bobby Wagner to a 1-year, $8.5 million deal. If this signing seems out of the blue because Bobby Wagner has spent his entire NFL career on the West Coast, remember that his former defensive coordinator Dan Quinn is now the head coach in Washington. Also, don't forget that Ken Norton Jr., his defensive coordinator for a period of time in Seattle, is now our linebackers coach. And I'm going to talk about that in another video. I'm working on a Rico report. And basically, Bobby Wagner said the reason that I left the West Coast, because he's been in the West Coast his whole life, born and raised there, played for Utah, has played in Seattle, and for the Rams, that's it. He's never done anything outside of the Western time zone. And he basically said the reason he was willing to come here and leave the Western time zone for the first time in his football playing life was literally just because of Dan Quinn, but most notably Ken Norton Jr., our linebackers coach. Again, ex-defensive coordinator coming here just to be a linebackers coach. It's ridiculous. We're building the type of staff like my Georgia Bulldogs do with Kirby Smart, where he's getting guys that have been offensive coordinators, head coaches, elite guys at different things, and then they're just coming in to be like a small positional coach. You just worry about this one specific thing, be elite at that, and then and then if everybody's doing their part, this is just a ridiculously elite staff where people are just outperforming their actual roles and their responsibilities. And the Commanders look like they're doing something very similar here. I'm super excited about it. But continuing on, Wagner is an obvious scheme fit for that reason. He's also a huge upgrade. Between Wagner and Frankie Louvu, the Redskins are likely to have an excellent linebacker play for the first time in a long while. There's a chance that Wagner could fall off a cliff because of his age, 34, but even if he does, it's not like Washington is risking too much on a 1-year deal. Shouts out to Walter Football for that one. And then lastly, the last thing we're going to talk about with Walter Football is he gave grades for the Sam Howell trade to the Seattle Seahawks for the pick swap. And we'll get to the grades at the end. I'm just going to read what he says. And then you'll see at the end who he felt like won the trade. You know, just to build a little suspense, you know what I'm saying? It's not very surprising that the Seahawks traded for Sam Howell. They've reportedly been fans of Howell, and they needed a backup quarterback in the wake of Drew Lock's departure. Ideally, this quarterback would be a young player with future starting potential. Sam Howell fits that description. He struggled late last year, but had some very bright moments at times, particularly against the Eagles. He was ultimately betrayed by his offensive line, but he could be a decent quarterback if he's well protected. The Seahawks are giving up a bit more than I would have liked, as swapping a 3rd and 4th round picks is somewhat significant, but it's not an egregious overpay. On the other end, I love this trade for the Redskins. They have no use for Howell because they own the number 2 overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. They have a veteran backup in Marcus Mariota, so Howell wasn't even guaranteed to make the final roster. Moving up from the 4th to the 3rd round could allow them to secure an impactful prospect. Or, I mean, this is me as Rico speaking now. maybe help us potentially trade up for Caleb Williams if that's something they want to do, or potentially trade up and back into the late first round after taking quarterback number 2 overall to get a top tackle. So, just remember that we may not actually end up drafting with that pick we got from the Seattle Seahawks, and maybe packaged together for another trade. So stay tuned. I would not be surprised at all. I think us trading back up into somewhere like the mid or late first after we take quarterback number 2 overall is the most likely result of that, but we'll see. So grade wise, he gave the Seahawks a B. Okay, that's good. And then he gave us a straight A. So Walter Football loves what we're doing right now. Absolutely loves it. And when we're talking about the whole Sam Howell trade, to dive even deeper than that, I think the show is called Gaming Fact, or no, Unsportsmanlike Conduct. It just happened to be the YouTube channel Gaming Fact uploaded it, I guess. I don't know. But on Unsportsmanlike Conduct, I believe his name is Chris Canty. He was literally saying that, like, this trade was stupid for the Seahawks or something like that. They were basically up there saying, like, the Commanders definitely won that trade. That was silly for the Seahawks to even do that. Shouts out to the Commanders for somehow getting that much value out of a guy that may not even necessarily be that good and things like that. So basically, so far from what I've seen everywhere, outside of the Commanders fan base that's relatively torn, it seems like most people feel like we won the trade, but there's still like a significant percentage of people that still feel like we did not win that trade and we should have kept Howell and things like that. But when you're looking at the national media and how they feel about it, so far I've only seen either Commanders won or people just don't have an opinion on it. They just reported it and kept it as that, but I haven't seen anybody feel like the Seahawks won the trade. And then before we get up out of here, we also have some individual compliments, because at Salary Cap 101 said, quote, "They've been very measured, very prudent in addressing positions of need without breaking the bank." So that guy loves it. Again, a non-Commanders fan. Then Kevin Durant said he loves the pickup of Austin Eckler. That was probably the signing that he's the most excited about, because it's the only one that I saw him actually tweet about and show that he was excited about. So maybe he liked the Austin Eckler signing just as much as Walter Football, where he felt like it was an A+. I like the Austin Eckler signing a lot, but I don't think it's better than the Frankie Louisville one, in my opinion. I don't think it's better than the Bobby Wagner, but we'll see, because maybe he looks like his 2021 self, and then Austin Eckler does end up being our best signing. You never know. And then you have Sam Monson from Pro Football Focus. Sam, and I don't believe this guy's a Commanders fan at all, but he said, "I think Washington bought low on Austin Eckler. I love that signing. Eckler got hurt last season and wasn't the same guy after coming back, and it torpedoed his value. But if he's back healthy in 2024, the dude's a baller." So he's loving it over there as well. And then you also have Mina Kimes on her podcast doing a whole breakdown on Frankie Louisville alone. Like in an over 2-minute video, she's just talking about how he's one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL. Like, not even just linebacker, the entire NFL. And she said, quote, "There's so many things about his game," unquote. Like, it was just so many compliments. She was breaking down how he can rush the passer. He's so versatile. He could stop the run. Hit her, and I believe it was Ben Solak on there with her, and they just were both like, yo, this guy is extremely underrated, and they can't wait for him to finally get the recognition that he deserves, the accolades that he deserves. And said like a whole lot of other compliments. And basically, I remember one interesting quote was that they said that Frankie tackles like he's 50 pounds heavier than he actually is. There was so many great compliments and quotes in there. It was amazing. I was just smiling the whole time listening to it, because again, for national media members to be talking about the Commanders in this light and the players that we brought in and how we're building this thing, it's just amazing. Again, like I said before the intro though, this is not for validation at all. We don't need them to say this, but it definitely is nice to hear them say this. I'm liking what I'm hearing. It's making me smile. I can watch ESPN and things like NFL Network with a straight face, because first of all, now we know they're at least going to talk about us. Because, I mean, I just feel like most of the time we're ignored. People act like we don't even exist a lot of the time on ESPN, on Fox, NFL Network. We literally just don't get discussed for the most part. And then when we do, it's typically either this sucks, they suck, whatever they're doing is a bad idea, they're playing poorly, whatever. The only times we really get brought up is when we play a team with more notoriety, and then we're just like that with that opponent that they had to go against. Like, yeah, they beat the Commanders, but let's talk about this team more than the Commanders that just lost and things like that. Or there's the other side of it, where when they do talk about us, it's just all bad. It's either they just act like we don't exist, or it's just pure bad, and that's it. And so it's nice to actually see us. Like, you can actually turn on the television, watch live TV, and maybe you'll actually see a Commanders compliment or two. And that's new, especially in my lifetime, for real, man. We've had moments, Kirk Cousins, I guess RG3 and things like that at times, but in my lifetime as being a burgundy and gold fan, I haven't really been able to just turn on ESPN and expect to hear something great about the Commanders. Now, of course, NFL Network focuses primarily on football only, so you're more likely to see a compliment for the Commanders over there. But even Fox, everybody, Mina Kimes, even just on her podcast, just taking the time to talk about Frankie Louvu alone and things like that. So I'm happy. I'm glad that everybody's seeing it, because it's at to a certain point you can't ignore us. We're about to be building this thing the right way so well that you just can no longer ignore us. I'm not acting like we're about to go to the Super Bowl this upcoming season, but we're definitely going to be one of those teams people are afraid to play against, and everybody's starting to see it before it happens. And then again, wait till we get to this draft, man. Wait till after this draft what happens. And also, we're not done with free agency. We may go out there and get a really good corner, maybe a really good safety, and I really hope we get like a really good tackle. So we may not be done, which makes this even more exciting, because every day it's been something. We haven't just gone a day without doing just completely anything. So you never know, man. By the time this video comes out and I go to sleep and I wake up, maybe we did something else. They're not off on the weekends like a lot of other businesses. Something can easily happen while I'm potentially doing something else, busy with something else. So I'm afraid of that as a, you know, burgundy and gold YouTuber, but I love it as a fan that we've been so busy, man. But again, I got to catch up on so many other signings and moves that we made, do full breakdowns of each individual guy that we got. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I love the fact that we're finally, I wouldn't even say getting our flowers, because it's not like we've been great for long, but at least people are seeing the light. People are starting to be like, okay, that Commanders team, all right, maybe we can no longer ignore them. Maybe they're no longer the butt of the jokes. Maybe they got something going on. So let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Do you appreciate the praise? Or are you just like me where you don't need it, but you like to have it? Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Do you agree with a lot of their points, or are you more down on the Commanders than the national media is right now, which is crazy? Because as a Commanders fan, you couldn't be more negative towards us than the national media has been for the past, I don't know how long, but now things may have flipped. I'm seeing a lot of Commanders fans saying that we aren't killing it. We're signing a bunch of old guys. Should have never traded away Sam Howell, all kinds of stuff. Whereas even the national media that typically ignored us and hated us, even like what we're doing right now. So let me know which side you're on and why especially. And make sure you stay tuned, man, because again, I really appreciate y'all. I'm working on more videos. I'm working on breaking down everybody else that we've signed, but it's just so many things going on. I'm working on catching up. I really appreciate y'all, man. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.